Greetings, beloved. I'm so glad you're here again on this Thursday at noon here on Eastern Standard Time and whatever time it is from wherever you are. I welcome you here again to this show, the Jersey Girl Wisdom Show, which, I was just discussing with my producer, is turning out to have a different feel. The original intention for the show was for it to have a little bit of lightness to it, but with wisdom and applicable wisdom that would be easily applied to life. But in face of what's happening in the world, we have been definitely turning our attention to subject matter from, with David Alexander last week, who's back with us again today, and Tracy Brown. Next week we have Ken Gordon. We're really going to be looking at some of the issues at hand and how we as spiritual humans, because we are spiritual humans, how we as spiritual humans can rise up and apply ourselves to what's happening. I'm going to be as objective as I can because I want to be a good host, but I am telling you that I'm bringing Reverend Dr. David Alexander back to us today because of what is going on in the world. And I know David has opinions that he's elegant with and presents a great line of thinking. So I welcome you to the show. I welcome back the Reverend Dr. David Alexander, colleague and friend, and I'm so glad you're here again today, David. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Great to see you, Rev Michelle. Jersey girl.
Yeah, well, I have a quote. And this is, I'm going to say years, have been looking for a way to say something succinctly that I struggled with. And you did it. You came up with it. So I'm quoting Reverend David right now on a post you put on Facebook last week. You said, unity without accountability is really just magical thinking, revisionist supremacy. I'll repeat that. Unity without accountability is really just magical thinking, revisionist supremacy.
I actually didn't say that. I shared that.
Oh, you shared it. It was on. Who said that?
But it was very close. I need to go back and look who I shared it from because it didn't have a name on the meme part itself.
Oh, okay.
So I shared it. So thank you for the credit, but I'll politely decline the credit. Although I completely agree with it, and we can certainly talk about it.
I apologize to the author then.
You're right. Yeah. We'll find it. Maybe we can track it down. I think the person I shared it from, it would be the author, but I need to double check and look.
Okay.
But in any case, I did say something similar, which I said, what did I say? I said, oneness without responsibility is cheap privilege.
Oh, yes.
That was one.
Yes, I remember that too. I actually do remember that. And I actually, what? They're both very good. Yes, they are. And I wanted to bring that out because what I'd like to set the show up for today with you is this. I am a spiritual human. I know you are a spiritual human. We are both the leaders of spiritual communities. And I've been doing this for 18 years. I'm not so sure how long you've been doing it. How long have you been doing it?
This is my 16, I think, going on 17 years.
Okay, so we have similar longevity in serving humanity. And the thing I also know about the both of us and many of our colleagues is that we are individuals dedicated to living a life in principle and in truth, and with principles about oneness and unity and all of that. All of that's true. And then there are some of us who feel very strongly about bringing out the underbelly and the dark side. And there are many who don't know how to merge. There are many who don't know how to stand in facing the reality of what's going on while being spiritual humans. And I would love your comments today to bring that together. whatever you have for me about that.
Yeah, well, I think a couple of things in relationship to loving that shadow side, right? It used to be very popular, and maybe still is, to talk about. And I want to emphasize the word talk, right? To talk about in sermons and classes and maybe a little workshop or seminar on our shadow work, right? Kind of bringing in Carl Jung and examining shadow side of consciousness. Um, and this is a broader issue that we have, which is that we really love um, the theoretical side of our teaching, the head side of it, the talking intellectual side of it. But when it comes to actually doing shadow work, right, when it comes to actually actualizing it and making that real, that's where we are right now. America is looking at the shadow of itself,
Right.
and it's
Of itself.
of itself. It's
Yeah.
uncomfortable. It's ugly. It's stuff we don't want to face. But you and I, as teachers, I don't know if I'm the only one hearing that feedback. Okay. Um, but you and I, as teachers, help people all the time look at the stuff that they don't want to look at,
Right.
right? And we're called effective teachers if we do that. If we're teaching a prosperity class and somebody's resistant and they just, they don't want to tithe, they don't want to look at that, they don't want to examine their hidden beliefs and where their unworthiness comes from related to prosperity, etc. If we hold their feet to the fire and say, "No, I'm not going to let you go. You signed up for this class, and I'm going to be on you about this, and we're going to figure out what the hidden beliefs." We would be considered an effective teacher, and people would send more students to us. They'd be like, "Yeah, go take prosperity from that person. They're really good. They don't let you off the hook." Right? I know
Mm-hmm.
like that in this teaching around that topic. And somehow when we apply the same kind of rigor, and I'm not going to let you off the hook, to our collective consciousness, particularly around racism and white supremacy, all of a sudden it's too political, it's too divisive, it's too this, it's too that. And, I just got to call our bluff and say, what gives?
Yeah.
That
Yep.
doesn't work. So we need to talk about responsibility and accountability because it's about demonstrating the principles. What we're really examining here is how consciousness works. And if we're going to, if we, when I say we, if America, if the Western United States consciousness is going to get beyond this moment, then we have to apply the principles of consciousness and we have to look at the things that we don't want to look at. And I don't know a better group of people than our ministers and practitioners to lead that if
Yeah.
we're willing,
Yep.
if we're
Yeah.
willing. We're willing to stand in the fire and take the hits, because what will happen is people will say, you're being political, you're being this, you're being that. Of course, we all have, we have Democrats and Republicans in our congregants. We have independents and libertarians. We have the whole spectrum across our country in all of our centers and study groups, etc. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nobody's calling any of those groups bad or wrong. But at least for me, what I am saying is, let's examine how consciousness works. So one of the things I said the week before, and then we'll get to these other quotes, was I said that whiteness is a false mental construct, and it sits at the heart of all of our dysfunction, right? And I got some people that put me on blast for that. You can't say that. You can't. I feel bad when you say that. I can't do anything about the color of my skin, etc. And it's like, okay, slow down a second. Notice your reaction. Notice if your feelings are triggered. Put that
Right.
aside for a moment. Let's
Do the
examine
work.
what about.
Do the work.
Do the work, right? You know, oh, you're making me uncomfortable. Well, of course I'm making you uncomfortable. We're looking at something that we've avoided for a long time. So we have to examine these mental constructs, because what we teach, thoughts become things. The
Right.
thought of whiteness has become a thing, right? And it's interfering with our democracy. I mean, Nancy Pelosi, I don't know if anybody saw this. I shared it on social media, but Nancy Pelosi on her Instagram said about January 6th, she said, what we saw, and she was referencing an article she had read a number of years ago. She said, what we saw was the tragic moment when people choose their whiteness over democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy Pelosi.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, right? This is not Jeremiah Wright, right? Not
Right, right.
Warnock, not Martin Luther King, not me or you, right? Not a religious or polarized figure. Well, she's polarized because she's political, but for an 80-year-old white woman to say what we're seeing is people choosing their whiteness. I was like, oh, hallelujah,
Well, that
right?
gives some that presents some hope.
Yeah,
I last night I had a meeting with my practitioners, and I have a team leader, but I felt responsible to be there with them last night and to provide a safe space for them to talk and share. And I'm blessed with a beautifully diverse community. I find it. I could get almost immediately tearful when I think about my community because I love diversity. And I love that my community reflects that. And I had written something and sent it to them and have shared it, with some of my folks. And to acknowledge everything we acknowledged last week, how on the steps of the Capitol, had it been Black Lives Matter, there would have been, greater response and deaths and such. And I wanted to also acknowledge that we cannot expect the people of color that we love and adore to be the ones to fix us or educate us. And so I put out a call to please be present, but remain curious, so that so that the African Americans and people of color in our communities don't have to feel like they have to hold it. And we spoke about the Black fatigue, and we talked about how exhausted they all are from from all that's going on and the threat that hangs behind them. Always, they're never without it. And so these are just some of the things that came out, and that's part of that. That is a result of thinking that whiteness is real. I want to read one quote from John Lewis, and then I'm going to let you go off on a lovely tangent, which I'm happy that I can see you're cocked and ready to go. John Lewis said, "Take a long, hard look down the road you will have to travel once you have made a commitment to work for change. Know that this transformation will not happen right away. Change often takes time. It rarely happens all at once. In the movement, we didn't know how history would play itself out. When we were getting arrested and waiting in jail or standing in unmovable lines on the courthouse steps, we didn't know what would happen, but we knew it had to happen." And for me, that's the bravery that is being called for from those of us who care. So please go ahead,
yeah,
chat,
yeah, and
chat with
and
me
and
more.
that is really at the heart of the quote that I gave, the one that is mine, that, oneness without responsibility is cheap privilege. It's a little bit of homage to Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who I think I talked about last week.
Yeah, we
Uh,
did. Hmm.
Dietrich Bonhoeffer had articulated this thing that he called cheap grace, and it was basically forgiveness without accountability, right? This idea that if in post World War II Germany we just forgive everybody who sided with the Nazis without holding them accountable, because we are religious, spiritual people, and that's what we're supposed to do. He called that cheap grace. Um, and so playing on that, it was like, we love claiming oneness. We love saying we're one with everything, we're one with everybody,
Mm.
we're one with all things, we're one with Trump and his supporters. God is all there is. Yeah, I get that. And oneness without responsibility. to me is a kind of cheap privilege. It affords me the privilege of saying, I'm one with everything. Therefore, I see the good over there. I see the good over there. I see that, and I don't have to pick sides, and I don't have to do any heavy lifting for healing the world of its pain where it's not expressing oneness. And I think fairly, I think we have a lot of that sort of cheap privilege within our organization, within our communities. And I just I can't stand for that. I got to call people to it and say, if you're going to claim oneness, then the moment that you claim oneness, claim the responsibility to make it manifest everywhere in the world where it's not expressing itself. And that means doing your own work. It means doing the heavy lifting. And to your point about black fatigue, my sermon last Sunday was about I say these things. I say these things that might feel divisive or upsetting to Caucasian European ancestry folks, like whiteness is a disease, or the mental construct of whiteness is a disease, or is operating like a disease. I say those things, and I say them intentionally in that way that will get your attention and perhaps make you feel uncomfortable, because people of color have been saying it for decades, for generations, for hundreds of years, right? E.W. Du Bois said it, Dred Scott said it, I mean, on and on and on. And we saw right here in Georgia, in the Senate runoff between Reverend Raphael Warnock of Ebenezer Baptist Church, Dr. King's pulpit, and the Republican appointee, Kelly Loeffler. Much of her attack ads were, almost 90% of them, were about calling Reverend Raphael Warnock a radical. It was all his title, literally in the debate. Every time she referenced him, she would say, "Radical Raphael Warnock." And so when people of color say these things, they're radical, they're extreme, they're angry, they're whatever it is. And so I take it upon myself to say those things, because they have been doing the heavy lifting and calling it what it is for a long, long time. And it's time that we start listening. And maybe if a different voice says it, maybe if a blue-eyed, blonde-haired, tall white guy says it, then maybe some other people will hear it. And in fact, I did. I had several people email me or message me and who were upset by what I said. But thankfully, I had their ear long enough that I was able to explain. And I said, well, here's what I mean by that. And to the T, every one of them responded, thank you, that really helps. So if me saying it helps it get through to more people, then I think that's the kind of thing we have to do. We have to be willing to do that heavy lifting. And all it is practicing the principles and taking responsibility for our oneness.
Yeah, because we do what you're saying to me, and this is what I encourage the people in our group that I'll talk about in a moment, and with my practitioners. It's willing to stay in the conversation long enough to give that information. And there is a little bit of an issue, and for those of you who might be listening, if you're uncomfortable and you feel like you couldn't have the kind of conversations that Dr. David is saying he has, it's probably because you haven't armored yourself enough. And I noticed that over the years, the more I read, the more books I read, the more I exposed myself to the subject matter, the more passionate I became, but with education underneath it. Then I could settle into a really healthy conversation. Before that, it was passion only. Mm-hmm. The problem with passion only, as I can say, oh, I love Black people, right? But if I couldn't back it up with a logical case of why my white brethren should really listen to the conversation, it fell on deaf ears.
Right.
Now to have some education and some experience and I said this last week and I'll say it again. There are so many books out there, and one at the top of the list I want to say again, because he's a therapist, because he comes at it from a place of healing, which is Resmaa Menika's book, my grandmother's hands.
Yeah.
So the one, oh, well, I'm going to do a plug for New Thought while we're here. This is the time where I just ask all of you, if you're paying attention, if you're listening to this now or recorded, please consider having New Thought Media Network on your list of giving. Give to this organization, give to it on a regular basis, even if it's a small amount. Use Many people recently got stimulus checks. Give a portion of your stimulus checks. You weren't expecting that money anyway. If you don't need it, give a portion of it to the radio station because it's valuable. So please do that. Please consider this, or what they're doing is worthy of your receiving. And the one other plug I want to put in for something that we're doing in my organization, my center in New Jersey, is that we started last year. We had something called we studied white fragility together, but we did it 14 weeks. We had 50 people and meeting in groups. Oh my God, it was so powerful. This is part two, and we're calling it Healing the Divide. And if you want to participate, and it begins in March of this year, there is we are training the facilitators, and it's going to be a multimedia mashup of inspiration. So, you can write to me about it at my revjerseygirl@gmail.com address, and I will send you information about it. But it was very healing. We have some very beautiful people in there, and it is mixed race group. Contrary to what the experts say, we are keeping it as mixed race. So I invite you to follow up and ask for information should you want to participate.
Wonderful.
So the one thing one thing that you're saying, David, which I want to speak this into the room for the Puritans, for the science of mind, religious science Puritans, is that everything that we're saying doesn't make being in principle wrong. It doesn't negate light and love and joy and beauty.
Right.
It's so I ask, we're not asking anyone to give that up. I just want to make that clear.
Right.
We're not asking anyone to give that up. What David's saying, way more than, eloquently than I am, but I'm in his camp here, is that it's both end. It is both end. And the way and I encourage you to challenge yourself in this. You in my opinion, I can't love somebody and not stand for them.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And I have people in my community. I love the ground. I love and worship the ground they walk on. And so for me to love them, but not stand by them, just makes it a lie.
Right. Right. Well, we go back to cheap privilege, right?
Yeah.
There's a deeper articulation. Part of the issue is we have people in our organization who are in love with our philosophy, right? They love the head part, the philosophical thinking part, thinking that I'm one, holding hands and singing peace on earth at the end of the service. It makes you feel good, right? And it should make you feel good. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But then you get back in your car and you flip the bird or curse to the guy who cut you off or takes your parking spot or whatever. And so there's a difference between our philosophy and our theology. And the difference between those two is philosophy is personal, right? It's your own thinking. Oh, I think I'm one with everyone. And I have this teaching called oneness or new thought or whatever you want to call it. Okay, that's your own personal viewpoint. Now, I can't judge how deep you are in that philosophy, but there you go. But our theology, theos is ology is understanding of, theos is God. So it's the understanding of God. Our theology is about relationship and it's about community because God is all there is and God's created everything we see. So it's inherently communal. You can't have a personal theology. Theology has to be about who you are in relationship to everyone else around you. And what you're talking about is that relationship. I love you. I honor you. I love your being, and I'm in relationship with you. I have to stand with you because that love is personal, right? So, I think it's about, for me, a deep dive into what we really mean when we say oneness, that we're one with everything. I did a long post about this last week, and I was busy online last week. My fingers were just, flying as the days went by. But I did a long post on this, and I said, we need to. Yes, we're one with everything. Does that mean I'm one with Trump? I'm one with the people who stormed the Capitol and broke in and da da. Yeah, I'm one with everything.
You
Okay,
say with a swallow.
right. With a swallow, because we need to understand what we mean when we say oneness.
Yeah.
Okay. So consciousness is cause. Okay. So it's important. Let me put it this way. It's important to understand where we are one as much as it is to understand what we are one with, right? And where we are one is in consciousness, because consciousness is all that there is. Okay. So there's no escaping that. You're one with everything in consciousness. However, you and I are acting in relationship in the world of effects, where that consciousness plays itself out. So, and this is my own interpretation, but I do not believe we are one with conditions, right? We're one with
Which
a
is
power,
which is the relative.
right? We're
We're
in
not one in the relative.
In the relative, exactly. It's another
Right.
great way of saying it. In the relative, in the level of effects, in the level of conditions, however you want to name that, right? You have a different relationship with conditions in the relative than I do, right? My wife, because she's from Africa, she's from Zambia, she has a different relationship in the world relative to her experience as a Black woman than I do, right? So we're not one in the relative, we're one in consciousness, but we are all in relationship with everything that's created. Because consciousness is all that there is, then everything that's created is in the world of effects or the relative, then you are in relationship with everything in the relative realm or the conditional
It
realm.
makes me think of a beautiful water fountain. All the water is being sourced from the pool, and it's being pulled up and spewed and shared. But then there's a drop over here and a drop over there. But the source initially, we're
Yes,
we're one in the source.
one
We're
source.
one with that which has sourced us. And then for that period of time, that relative time, we have a separate and individual expression. And somewhere humans in that separateness from each other, and maybe their own perception of separateness from source itself, struggle in that separateness. And that's where the human condition comes in, and the objection and the fear and the anger, and it exists at that level.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way of saying it, because we struggle at the level of relationship, and that struggle is as old as time, right? That's the story of Cain and Abel. That's the story of Adam and Eve and their relationship with their understanding of the divine, and quote unquote getting kicked out of the garden. It's about our relationship with the divine and then each other. And so if I'm in relationship with everything, that means I'm in relationship with the people who stormed the Capitol, or you fill in the blank for your own other, whoever it is that you don't like or don't appreciate or don't think that you're one with. You're in relationship with that. And so the question then becomes, well, how am I examining that relationship? Because all relationships teach us something, right? It's about my feet, what comes up when I think about that. What are those feelings guides for? What do those bring lessons for? If you're in a bad relationship, the bad relationship, has uh, has a lesson in it. But, but just because the relationship has something to teach you doesn't mean that you need to stay, right? You get the lesson and move on, right? Get out,
Right,
right?
right, right, right.
oneness. This is the other one of the other posts I did last week. Oneness does not mean playing nice with conditions and effects that harm us or harm other people. Right? We're in relationship, so I should learn the lesson. What is the lesson here? What is this here to teach me? And then move on. And it's okay to move on at that level.
Well, I'll never forget something from the one of the single driest books I've ever read in my life that had some of the most valuable leadership lessons is The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yes.
It was assigned to me, otherwise I don't think I would have read it. But I have returned to
Me
those
too.
lessons. I've returned to those lessons over and over and over again. And oh, wait a minute. No, it was not that book. It was Leading Consciously by Dipashi's Chatterjee. That's the book. And he teaches this Sanskrit term, Tat Twam Asi. And it means I am that thou art.
Mm.
And I'll do a little true confession here, because I know this is where my struggle comes in. And I think this is where maybe other people of similar you share it, that because I believe that I am that thou art, and because I believe in it, I will take time and I will ponder this. What does someone believe so strongly that they're willing to take those actions?
Right.
I make myself walk, at least, mentally, in the shoes of another.
Right.
Because I want to know what would cause you to do the actions, to do the actions that you've done. And so I will take time to walk in the shoes of another. I will. And I will ask those questions. Am I capable of that? Can I find what is this person's impassioned about? And if so, would I move up the steps? I mean, and we're just using the capital, obviously, as an example. Now, I got to tell you, there's a lot of slam dunk things I'd say, oh, God, no. I mean, there are horrors in this country well, not just in this country. There are horrors anywhere. Matter of fact, I want to say one more thing before you comment again. I recently watched a movie, and I encourage everyone to watch this. It's called Between Right and Wrong, and they are stories of reconciliation. It's a documentary. It's not just a movie. Oh my God! It is the reconciliation with what happened in Rwanda, what happened in Ireland, and what happened with the Palestinians. Beyond Right and Wrong. Get your hands on it and watch the movie, because I got to tell you, if people can survive a genocide in the way they did and practice forgiveness, I think we all have a little bit of hope here. So, David, I'll shut up again.
That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah. And again, when we walk in those shoes, when we invite ourselves to be in relationship with the thing that we don't understand, or the thing that we judge as wrong, or whatever the case may be, then what we're doing is we're inviting ourselves to see, what the underlying consciousness, what the underlying condition, what the underlying thoughts and feelings are that led to that action that we judge as wrong. What is, and when we do that, we discover there's a lot of pain, right? There's a lot of pain. That was,
Yes,
underneath anger.
absolutely.
Underneath anger, there's pain and distrust and disenfranchisement.
Yeah.
And if I think one thing that any political pundit would agree with on any network would be that the supporters that we saw last week, that they feel that they are a disenfranchised group. Now, whether you and I agree with that, whether we think that's a legitimate thought or not, has nothing to do with it, right? Because our feelings are not rational.
Right. And agreement doesn't make something right or wrong.
Right, exactly. So our feelings aren't rational, but they certainly feel disenfranchised.
Right.
And how do we heal the feeling of disenfranchisement? How do we heal the feeling of not belonging? How do we heal the feeling or the consciousness that says, I've been ignored, I've been left out, we all can relate to those feelings at one time or another in our life. We work there again. So now we're getting back to, we're one in consciousness, we're one in source, work there to heal those same feelings within inside of ourselves. Then we can get there. That keeps us in relationship with the thing, because the moment we break and distance ourselves from the relationship, is the moment it really gets out of hand. And, of course, we're well in that path already.
Well, and I want to take a point you just made and take it a little tiny bit further,
Mhm.
because I heard you say something before about somebody made somebody feel something. Okay, in the highest truth, no one can make any one of us feel
Correct.
anything. Let
Correct.
us be clear, and I'm sure we sync up about this. No one makes you or I feel anything. It is that which is alive within, and it gets sparked, it gets triggered, yes. But when we walk into a room and we walk in with what we have, it is imperative that we own it. Because if we're going to heal, because right, hurt people, and heal people.
Yeah.
And if we're going to be part of that, it can only happen here, folks.
Right.
It can only happen here. And we can, if the as far as long as anyone gives responsibility to another, I got news for you. You're a victim of yourself and your emotions.
The biggest grounding of my childhood came, I think, because I grew up in New Thought. I think the biggest grounding of my childhood came when I told my mother, when she said, "You're making me so mad," and I said, "I can't make you angry." I've
Yeah,
been
my
paying
young
attention
son
from
has
age
reminded me of that.
Yeah, so again, that goes back to that radical responsibility that is within
Yes,
oneness. Take
radical
this
responsibility.
thing makes me feel this. Okay, take responsibility for that feeling. I
Yeah,
didn't put that feeling there. That
right,
feeling, our feelings are insights for our own learning.
right,
So in a relationship, they get triggered. Or I like to say, I may have pushed your buttons, but I did not install them.
right,
Right.
right. Hmm.
So they get triggered in relationship because the relationship is the container for our own growth and evolution. So they get
Mm-hmm.
triggered, but then you are to take that feeling and go within and say, what is this about? What is this here to teach me? How can I heal this? What do I need to do about this? I want to bring in, because we have anger and hate and all of this stuff being manifested. I want to bring in Howard Thurman.
Mm-hmm.
Breaks down the anatomy of hate in a way that I think is very helpful to us right now as a country, um, because it gives us also the blueprint of how to unravel it and undo it. Um, in his book, Jesus and the Disinherited, Howard Thurman was a beautiful mystic, inspiration to Martin Luther King. And in the chapter on hate, in Jesus and the Disinherited, he says that it's made of that hate is the fourth part of this process of manifestation, if you will. The first is what he calls contact without fellowship. And we have contact with each other, but no fellowship, right? No real connection. So again, that speaks to relationship. We interact with each other. We drive the same roads. We get gas at the same place. We shop at the same Walmart or whatever. But there's no fellowship. So we have contact with the other, but no true fellowship with the other. Um, Two, he says that leads to unsympathetic understanding, right? So we don't really understand another person's pain. We don't really understand their makeup and what makes their story and their journey unique. We make assumptions about why they do what they do and what the feel. Well, they shouldn't do that because they have all the privilege in the world, or they shouldn't do that because they have whatever. Um, so unsympathetic understanding leads to ill will. So now we have ill will for the other person because, of course, we have ill will because we don't understand their motivations, right? And then that leads to hatred. So he says hatred is what we're dealing with on the outside, but we need to unravel it and see, there's ill will underneath the hatred, underneath the ill will, there's unsympathetic understanding, and it all stems from contact without fellowship. And
Well,
that's why communities
and
like yours and like mine are so important because we create contact and fellowship, right? We get to
but it
create.
also it's not a surprise to anyone then that in light of the fact that since March of last year we have had to systematically reduce our contact in a literal way. So we're
Right.
not even. It reminds me of the movie Crash. We're not even bumping up to each other to have interactions or to say excuse me. We don't even have that luxury right now because everybody is afraid. Not only are they separate for their health reason, but there's so much fear being promoted, and I have no conspiracy theory about this, but it's the result of not wanting to get sick. And so we have all this separateness, and we've created new ways. We've created new ways to judge each other, which has to do with, did you get tested or you didn't get tested, or you're going to get the vaccine or you didn't get the vaccine, or are you quarantining yourself? So in
Or do
that,
you wear a mask or not?
yeah, that's a bedrock for a mess. And then put all of this political stuff on top of it. It is no wonder that this year
Yeah,
has turned out to
yeah.
how it's turned out. And I don't know about that book, but I'm going to order it.
It's very good. Not very long. Like I said, it's a thin book, but Jesus and the
Yeah, I
Disinherited,
love him. Yeah.
Howard Thurman, he's absolutely. So the next chapter is on love, and he really, and you can see the building blocks
Mhm.
of the civil rights movement within it,
Yeah.
as Dr. King
Yeah.
would
Beautiful.
to this work.
Beautiful.
It's a great read and very
So
helpful.
I feel responsible to bring up. We went over time again, which is fine. Diego doesn't mind, and we're here. And Thursday is a light day on the radio show, so I have the luxury of going over. Um, um, David, once again, your brilliance. I thank you. It's a delight, and I know you are extremely responsible to the subject matter, and you do it well, and you continue to brave a path for many people who walk gingerly behind you, but they are walking behind you, and that's a good thing.
I see.
And
Come on.
somebody has, yeah, it has to happen, and I
Yeah.
appreciate that you put yourself out there and that you're willing to do that, truly. For those of you if you just found us on our way out, this is Jersey Girl Wisdom every Thursday at noon on the New Thought radio station. And I thank you for being here. Next week, my guest speaker is the Reverend Dr. Ken Gordon, who was a recent spiritual leader for the Centers for Spiritual Living internationally. So he'll be here with us. And David, I reserve the right to have you back.
Absolutely. Anytime. Can I close with just one more thought though?
Please do.
As you were sharing, I just thought, as people trying to find, the moral courage or the gumption, whether they're in spiritual leadership or in their own communities or families or whatever it may be. I remember many years ago, it was a very quick story, when I was building a relationship with a dear friend, mentor of mine, Bishop Yvette Flunder, who's a out LGBT, Black bishop, and that in the traditional Pentecostal world, that's wrong on so many levels, right? Not allowed. And
A
as I
walking contradiction.
yeah. And so as I was allying with her and wanting to support her work and bring relationship between our organizations and all these things, I said, what can I do? How can I, how would you like me to best show up for you? We were in her office in San Francisco, and she said, "You're asking the wrong question, honey." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, what's the right question?" She said, "You need to ask yourself, what are you willing, uh, what are you willing to surrender? Because if you follow me and if you support this journey, it will cost you something. It will cost you something." And so I just wanted to speak to that idea that that if you feel that, oh God, if I speak out, it's gonna, this is what Jesus meant when he said, if you lose your life, right, you gain everything. Those who lose their life gain their life, right? You surrender your mental constructs, whether they're of whiteness or whether they're of whatever, because what you gain is everything back. You gain what we are a teaching of wholeness. And what I want to guide people and usher people into is claim your whole self. Let go of the false constructs that are holding you back from your wholeness. And in this case, for many of us, whiteness is one of those false constructs, right? but so is your sense of worthiness holding you back from prosperity. So is your sense of whatever that's holding you back from health or a bright relationship. Right? This is what we teach. I want people to be liberated into their whole self, and we can't be liberated into our whole self if we, cling to false constructs like whiteness or anything else. But you can fill in the blank there. So feel that fear of, oh my gosh, this might cost me something if I speak out, but know that on the other side of that is you gain everything back. You get your whole self back. And that's my prayer for humanity. It's like, let's get our whole self back.
Yeah, I admit to you, it's been a scary road.
Yeah.
I'll always be honest. It hasn't been an easy road. And yet I feel elevated. Even with what's going on, I feel elevated, and I can sleep with myself easier at night, knowing that I was willing to take a stand and knowing that I was willing to speak truth to power, as you all like to say, that I've been willing to do that. Not easy, worthy, and valuable. Join us, if you will. Come back again. We will have more conversations like this, and know that from me and from Dr. Dave, know you are loved and appreciated, and I look forward to seeing you again. David, I adore you. Thank you.
Adore you
Be
too.
well.
Bye, everybody.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.